Hi. Before we get to our panel discussion, I'm going to do a brief introduction on the Toronto BIM community. So the purpose of the Toronto BIM community is to create a local network across all facets of the industry, centering its focus on BIM technologies and processes. Since our launch early last year, we've had steady growth in our membership, and we're about 460 members to date, and we are proud of our diversity in our membership and plan to maintain that over the coming years. In addition to BIM technology and processes, we are creating opportunities to come together across all sectors to learn and collaborate. So we've had a number of successful events ranging in topic and format. And we also are very proud of publishing our first annual BIM report, which came out earlier this year. It's free for download on our TBIMC website. I have a few hard copies with me today. And later this year, we will be releasing the survey for the next annual BIM report. So if everyone could stay tuned for that and fill it in when you comes across your desk. And we are an affiliate of Building Smart Canada. We belong to a network of BIM communities across Canada. And we support and are supported by national organizations, both Building Smart and Canada BIM Council. Many of the people on the board belong to Building Smart as well as Canada BIM Council, so there's a lot of overlap. And we have partnerships with researchers from the University of Toronto, as well as the George Brown College School of Construction Management. And we encourage you to become a member, but we also encourage feedback. We look forward to receiving feedback, and we use this to create our upcoming events and future initiatives. And so we're excited about our next event, which is October 23rd. We'll be covering the topic of BIM, what it's like to be a BIM leader in your organization. We'll be sharing and having open discussion. We hope to see you there. This will be at the George Brown College, the Waterfront campus. And on to our panel discussion. So I will introduce the panelists. Brent Mowdy is a practicing architect. He is Global Director for Design Technology with IBI Group and sits on the CanBIM board. His career is focused on BIM, interoperability, and major project collaboration. Brent is the treasurer for the Toronto BIM community. Amal Adanat is the design manager and BIM leader at Multiplex. She manages and oversees Multiplex BIM strategic planning in North America. Her career is focused on digital delivery strategies for large-scale projects. And Omar Zuberi has 11 years of experience in the construction industry. He is currently Elliston's VDC manager for the GTA and Southwestern Ontario. Omar is also the membership chair for the Toronto BIM community. And our moderator this afternoon is Arash Ashi. Arash is the research chair of the Toronto BIM community, the associate director of the Building Tall Research Center at the University of Toronto, and an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Waterloo. Okay.
Thank you, Claudia, for that introduction. We've had a full and very interesting day so far, learning about different aspects of smart cities and smart buildings. The goal for this session is to discuss BIM and in the role that it could and perhaps should play with respect to smart cities. So with no further ado, we'll get to our panels. We have a great panel with me today. Just to get you warmed up, I'm going to start with an easy question first for the entire panel. I'd like to ask you to tell us in 1 or 2 sentences what makes a city smart from your perspective. And just for fun, how would you rate the city of Toronto in terms of smartness? Claudia, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say that what makes a city smart is shared data across multiple systems. So I would say that Toronto is low on the smartness level, but has potential. I think there's smart systems and smart buildings, but they haven't yet been integrated. And developing those pathways is challenging, but I think it's coming.
Excellent. I think a smart city is made smart by all of us being able to access information we want to access. And the simple example, you walk outside the door, if you pointed at something and said, I want to know something about that, right now we're completely disempowered to do that. So I would say Toronto's on the low level.
I think a smart city is a city that's connected to its citizens. It's a data-driven city, and when it comes to Toronto, I think we do have the potential to be a leading city when it comes to smart city.
I think a smart city is, began smart. So, we built it with smart technologies and the intent for it to communicate with one another and all the other instances that my other panelists here have indicated.
Okay. So the consensus is that we have potential.
We have potential.
Okay. Now, we want to make this as interactive as possible. There are a few microphones around the room. If you have a question for the panel, if you want to jump in to a particular topic, by all means, just raise your hand or just go to a microphone, and then we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. Now, with that said, back to Claudia. What is BIM's role in the design of smart cities?
I think BIM is essential to the development of smart cities. I think we saw a lot of examples of that today with Sean Gilmore's presentation of Forge, overlapping sensor information and current data with building information models. And I think that essentially a BIM is a database of assets that have information tied to them. And I think that for smart cities, it's about collecting all of the individual building information models and collecting them and tying them, integrating them to a GIS. And then you have a whole city system where we can start to look at, long-term city planning initiatives and so forth. The collection of building information models could be also used and harnessed within municipalities for their own code compliance through permitting applications. So I think BIM can be used for smart buildings, but as far as smart cities is concerned, it's about connecting all of those individual models and tying them to GIS.
Okay, just to add to that, I guess, from a city as University of Toronto, we're working with TBMC and the local municipalities to develop an e-permitting system based on BIM submissions. It's been done in a number of cities around the world. Nothing has taken the market yet, but we're working with the local municipalities here to start working on that and be able to at least have the municipality have that capability of, instead of submitting a whole bunch of drawings, paper copies, you could then just submit your BIM model and have at least a number of automated compliance checks being done on them. Now, Brent, beyond the design stage, where do you think BIM fits, and how can we fully utilize its benefits in the context of smart cities?
So conceptually, I'd say if BIM is truly considered as a process and it's applied from start to finish, and BIM is truly conceived of as a collection of components, not a development of a whole entity. So we're building pieces We're assembling the pieces together. We're designing these models as they're to be constructed, thinking about how they're going to be operated. BIM then becomes nothing more than a real robust stream of information. And you take that stream, and as long as it's connected, tied, or glued to other streams, like GIS, asset information, et cetera, you then have a cohesive whole. BIM could be the visualization mechanism. BIM could be the access point to information. BIM has so much potential so long as those streams can be glued, merged, and made intelligent.
Okay. Amal, where do you think owners fit? What role do you believe they should play in the creation of smart cities? Again, as they relate to the BIM discussion.
I think owners play an important role in smart cities. Trillions of dollars are being invested in smart cities today, and the owners have the responsibility of managing and operating their buildings that need to connect with other owners' assets, other government assets, and so really the owners have the responsibility at the beginning of the project. If it's a project, they also have the owners need to have the right partnerships with technology companies, communication companies, city officials, so that they can work together, because no one owner can do it on their own. And this is a more collaborative effort with the right partnerships that would lead to at least a policy or a framework around how the data will be collected, how the data will be used, how the data will be integrated and shared. And this is more than one owner's responsibility. But it's a lot of investment across the globe, not only in one particular region.
Okay. Just to add to that again, from the survey that we did in the first annual BIM survey that a lot of you actually participated in, lots of familiar faces that spent time with us and did the interviews, lack of government mandate was one of the #1 complaints that was basically slowing the adoption of BIM in the industry. So that came across on that survey. Just to echo your point and the role of owners. Yeah.
So I think being a carbon neutral smart city is a very important goal to achieve, and there should be a roadmap in place as we design and we plan smart cities that by a certain date there has to be a target, a roadmap that would take us to at least 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Now, Omar, we've heard about flying cars, holograms, AR, VR, and the sci-fi vision, but what's the current reality of what's immediately possible given today's technology? How smart can the cities really be?
Well, I'd ask everyone to look at their phones and see how smart their phones are. So, the current reality is the technology's there, the software needs to catch up. So we know we've got laser scanners, we've got, the Xbox Connect where you are the controller, where it can see your gestures. We've got cameras that have facial recognition and emotion recognition. We've got all these different technologies that, like, to extend Brent's comment, like where the data needs to be cohesive, where these technologies need to be joined together. They need to feed into each other, and that's where things become smart. So you need to start merging these systems together, and that's where, the whole disruption and, Google's knocking at your door. They're starting to aggregate not just data, but they're also aggregating algorithms and systems to more efficiently bring this data and cross-reference it. And with the cross-referencing, then for Google, at least, they get to advertise more. But for example, you've got a smart city, and you're seeing a lot of people are ordering Chinese food from this one restaurant. Well, guess what? There's only one Chinese food restaurant in the whole city, and now you've just discovered that there's a market. You can open up 3 more Chinese food restaurants, and you'll have viable businesses for all of them, so on and so forth. So it's about gathering data. It's about aggregating data. And right now we have cameras. We've got City of Mississauga has smart LED lights that will tell you when the light needs to be replaced. We've also got systems of smart traffic lights. We have cameras at those traffic intersections, which can tell you what the traffic flow is like. If the signal timing needs to be changed to allow more traffic to go southbound instead of eastbound. All this information needs to be cross-referenced. So the future is already here in individual fits and starts. It needs to be aggregated together.
Okay, thank you. Now, Claudia, just following up on that, how will the use of technology and implementation of these smart cities ideas alter our built environment and the city's architecture, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of changes with architecture and in smart cities. I think the life cycle will be considered far more. We'll be trying to build cities that are more durable. So we'll be choosing materials that have more durable and have a longer lifespan, possibly with a higher capital costs to offset operational costs, long-term costs. I see architecture evolving in a way that it responds better to its built environment in an effort to consume less energy and to respond to green initiatives like the carbon neutral that we were speaking of earlier. And that building facades will be more responsive and create energy as well as house plant life. And I think that designers and architects, while designing, will become a lot more logical and formulaic in the way that they work, using computational tools and data to make decisions about space and architecture. And I think that smart cities will have more flexible and adaptive spaces for use over time, and in short term, more collaborative spaces. And I think that smart cities will just expect much better architecture.
So, thank you for that. But I want to pose a question to the audience and then to the panel. Do you think the smart cities come first and then the architecture changes? Or do we need to alter our architecture to enable smart cities? Anybody from the audience wants to jump in?
Should I start naming people?
Yep.
There's a lot of people here from IBI. Somebody talk.
Oh, we've got a volunteer.
There
Yes.
we go. All right.
You hear me? Okay. The question that I have is actually for the government mandate.
Okay.
Great discussion. If we go back to time, there was no government mandate to invent an iPhone or Samsung or Android or Apple systems. What we need, I guess, is to offer the product to the people that they can use it. Then we will be surprised with a lot of people using BIM or other softwares for daily development. That's what I think. My point here, I think the government mandate is just an excuse for people, but we can't force the technology in the market.
Okay.
As a private sector, yeah.
So, actually, funny enough, I was listening to a podcast on my morning commute over here through Toronto traffic, which could definitely use some smartening. But it was actually Freakonomics, and they were interviewing someone, and the pitch was, is the government entrepreneurial? And the gist of it, the main thrust of the argument was that if it wasn't for GPS, we wouldn't have Google Maps. If it wasn't for DARPANET or ARPANET, we wouldn't have the internet. We wouldn't have the internet as we know it today. So, yeah, the government has the responsibility to build the infrastructure and let the people use it. And I think that is the main, I would agree with the podcast I just listened to this morning, that private industry does not see an immediate return on investment for building infrastructure. That's where the government comes in. But then private industry can then come in and leverage that infrastructure to improve the lives of people and help make a smarter city.
And I would say it's kind of like chicken and the egg. And if we try to answer the question, we'll never get to a resultant. So there has to be things happening in parallel where government is taking action, where it's pressing towards a better good. So I think government mandate of some sort will help to achieve a path forward, a direction, or a set of certain goals, metrics, or KPIs. In the same breath, there's all of us in our mindset, there's all of us in how we design and what we're doing. And oftentimes, if you just look at the breadth of the audience here, we'll get bogged down into technicalities of software usage, professional liability, could I be negligent, I just have to stamp drawings, my idea is over, project's done. When in reality, every single thing we do, and this is a quote that came from IBI CEO and president in tandem, we're designing information, and from that information, we're making our output. And I loved when I heard them say that, because I'm not designing a building, I'm not designing a roadway, I'm designing a speck of data. That's all I'm doing. And that piece of data must be connected, it must not die. And if we could take that approach and really adjust the mentality and change how we think to drive us towards what really is a better good, we can achieve smart city. And it comes with us changing our ways, it comes with governments and clients changing the expectations and empowering us to change our ways, but it's all in tandem, so there's no chicken and egg.
Okay. Well, the whole discussion of government mandate can go on for a long time, and we've had some of the discussion in the report. The idea being that UK, Singapore, and other examples have done a top-down approach where they mandate it and then they provide resources for the industry to catch up, whereas Canada has taken a middle-out approach where the industry is actually a lot more prepared than the government. We have our buildings designed in BIM, but we're still submitting to the drawings to the municipalities. So there needs to be a balance. From our analysis at least, I think we're at a tipping point in Canada where the industry has caught up to a point that the government can now take a step in and catch up to the industry. But that whole discussion could go for a long time. So in keeping with our questions, yeah.
Arash, I would like to jump in and say, yes, I do see evidence of the government catching up. I do see them asking for more and more BIM-related deliverables. Department of Defense is asking for things like that. So it is happening.
Excellent. Now, Brent, what do you think the average person needs to do to engage with the smart city, whether an inhabitant or someone visiting?
I think it's a change in mentality and a reduction of fear, I think is probably the twofold. And I'll use an example, when we talked about a lot of technologies today, you've seen Uber, Airbnb, et cetera. Imagine if the payment mechanisms were not monetary based, but information based. So imagine if you're pulling up to the curb to park your car, but instead of paying in a meter with money, you're paying or registering the need via information connected to a data stream and exchanging something you bring to the digital economy for the usage of that all via data streams. So, what that means, I don't know. How that would occur, I don't know. But it would be a complete change in how I go park my car. And I use that as a simple example to say, you've got to break outside of the bounds of the norm. I'm sitting there doing my project, or I'm sitting there walking into the city and I'm being asked to do something. I've done a lot of global travel, and I see the fear, oh my God, they want me to connect to a network and give my credit card and do this just so that I can access, and you see this immediate step back. Why do I need to give them that information? Well, the flip side is, well, why not? And I understand the security, the privacy, the fears, et cetera, but we have to break that down to the point where the fundamental exchange of information is second nature. And therefore, that interactive ability, whether I'm visiting a city, whether I'm native to a city, is facilitated through that digital economy. Whether protected by blockchain, empowered by 5G connectivity, whatever the case is, I have that trust, which was mentioned earlier today.
Okay, so the concerns about privacy are often debated when it comes to smart cities. Amal, how personal do you anticipate the data collection to be? And what are your thoughts on who owns the data and its security issues?
I personally think we should be concerned. So the concern should be there, not too concerned that we wouldn't actually participate, but concerned enough to act, be engaged, and understand the implications. Also acting and engaging to have some, again, policy and framework around the data, what can be shared, or maybe testing different scenarios when it comes to sharing the data and understanding how what will happen if it's exposed, for example, or in case of a cyber issue for the data, how can we collectively react to what happens with the data when it's shared by a third party that we don't really trust, and we didn't give our permission for our data to be shared with.
And if I can just add, and I think that's one thing, I totally agree. And it's exciting in the world today that we have ISO standards that are now being developed on how to share and not to share, secured versus not secured. The whole issue with the Facebook and whatever that company was on the rules and regulations around data protection. So I think, like, furthering what I was saying is that as long as there is the governance, there is the security, and we've built that infrastructure in place, then we can reduce our fear. So I'm not here saying I'm not afraid, right? I do have concerns that if I put my bank information out there, what if something happens to the contents of my bank account? That's scary. But in the same breath, my bank accounts, I've done online access, I don't know, since I've had the bank account. So therefore, with a click of a button, someone somewhere could zero my account. Right? It's there, it's digital. So I have the trust in the bank that the framework is in place to protect the information that I hold personally, valuable, that I need.
But at the same time, there are already rules and regulations in place that could make it a bit daunting, such as, that whole wave of authorizations from websites because of the new European requirements that they have to ask you for your permission to store a cookie or something like that. Well, imagine having to step outside the door of your smart city and getting a pop-up saying, hey, you're stepping outside, is it okay if we track you, or if, you're going to be watched, so here's a cookie, press OK, and then you step into the elevator and there's another alert, and then you step out of the elevator and there's another alert. So there could be some adjustments that need to happen in that future world.
There'd be 7 trillion alerts, as they told us earlier.
It's like Windows Vista all over again.
Nice.
So, what do you think? Can I see with a show of hands how many of you are concerned about data issues regarding smart cities?
You're all being recorded.
Not a lot of people are concerned. Wow. Okay.
Well, I would say you should be concerned. Like my example about the Chinese food restaurant. Well, how did they track that all these people were going to the Chinese food restaurant? It's not necessarily anonymized data. So maybe there should be systems in place that talk about, this is a smart city, and it's so smart that someone could conceivably reverse engineer it to figure out exactly where you've been over the past week and how you spent 3 hours binging on Netflix watching some, Paw Patrol, and you don't even have kids.
And it is interesting that we do take for granted that right now we're talking about smart city, the outside environment, the connectivity in the urban fabric. But if you step into an airport, you're in a completely regimented smart building. You are 100% tracked on where you're going, what you're doing, and what you interact with in an environment like that. And we're all okay with that, because if we weren't okay with that, we wouldn't be able to use the airport.
Yeah, but again, being in an airport is something like you would expect certain level of security. You would expect not to be concerned about the type of information that's collected while you're at the airport, versus when you're at home, you're in your community, and what type of information you need. Definitely, they need your consensus before collecting certain information. It's fine to collect information from a traffic light and making sure the streets will not be as congested as it is today, but maybe other sorts of data collected needs consensus from the people, the citizens of the city, the visitors, whether they are willing to share it or not. Having said so, we do see people today sharing way more information than, even personally, I would share way more information today than what I used to share 10 years ago. And certain sites now and certain companies did win the trust of the people. But again, it's data, it's on a cloud, and we just have to be concerned enough to act and be engaged and understand the implications.
And this is not something that is, an idea that could happen. It's already happened. The UK has the most cameras per capita of any city in the world, and they've got cameras everywhere, and they're all going to a central location. And I recall, a news interview with a gentleman who, he went to the corner store, he bought something, he came back, he went to his apartment, and, about maybe an hour later, there was a knock on his apartment door, and the police were asking about his path. Apparently a crime had been committed along the path of his travel. So they used the cameras to track his entire path of travel right up to his apartment because they knew which light went on when he turned his lights on as he entered his apartment. So this is not something that you need a smart city to come up against. This is here and now. And, we need to think about it. Yeah, the smartphone as well.
Sending information, Google sending information 14 times daily to the Google Cloud, and this is the targeting you what to sell.
Yeah.
So it's already here.
I'm sure everyone here is all of us here at one point had the moment where you're talking about something with a friend, then you go to Google it and it autofills. It's almost as if your phone is listening to you. And
Thanks
it
to
probably
Alexa.
is. Keywords.
Okay, so data security issues aside, Omar, what do you think? What do you think the greatest challenge will be in the immediate future? If everything suddenly fell into place today, how quickly can we have a smart city?
I think Lisa, you were making a joke earlier when you were up on stage with Brent. You were talking about how smart a city is, and you mentioned, it depends on the people in it. I'd like to extend that a little bit. Nothing is foolproof. So it could be the smartest city in the world, but if someone decides to take a wrench and stick it in a carburetor, it's still going to break. But then the city will realize, hey, there's a broken carburetor. We should send them ads for plumbers to come fix that. What is possible today? We've got cameras. We've got the capability. If we bring in the right software and we plug it into the feeds for those cameras, we probably already do. You see everything from Cable Pulse 24. You understand what traffic is like, what the congestion is like on the 401 or certain city streets or the Gardner. So you're already getting smart information about your city. You've got the app called Waze, which is crowdsourced information. And that is smart. It's aggregated information that provides a very real benefit to you about conditions around the city. So there's already capabilities here that are allowing for that. I think Toronto Hydro had a large area Wi-Fi network. And they had it for free until they figured out how to finally monetize it. But while it was free, I used it extensively. And just so, have I gone off on a tangent, or did that answer the question?
Yeah.
A little bit?
So how quickly can we have a smart city?
Oh, how quickly? We've already got two smart floors of the Water Park Place. Those are the Cisco floors. They're pretty smart. We'd have to build the infrastructure in. So we've got pie in the sky, everything falls in place. Let's say we use Hydro One's Wi-Fi network. So then we connect all our smart connected devices in the downtown core to that Wi-Fi network to start transferring information. And assuming that doesn't destroy the network, we're getting all this wonderful information, and it's starting to get fed into a central server that's starting to aggregate and cross-reference. And some of these devices, let's start off small. Let's start saying we're looking at the energy consumption information about the offices. So I think a year or two ago at CAMBIM, there was a presentation where someone actually did that. They took an office building and they attached some sensors to the main power feed, and they actually read the power requirements for this office building throughout the day. Normally, power requirements for the office building are, assumed to be turn the power on at 8, turn the power off at 5. So power requirements go up at 8, power requirements drop at 5 when everyone leaves. Everyone leaves to go out to the suburbs. What ended up happening was, depending on the time of day, lunchtime, the power requirements would drop for the building, but then they would go up for the food court because everyone's going to go get food. So you start to get a more detailed understanding of what the actual requirements are, as opposed to what assumptions we have been taking for granted. So a lot of assumptions we've been taking for granted are going to break down with this data. So you're getting all this data, you're starting to understand what the actual power requirements are. That can feed into Toronto Hydro, who can start spooling up or spooling down generators based on actual need, based on actual data, as opposed to assumptions, which they're already doing, but on a much larger scale. So that's the power requirements. There's air conditioning. which also feeds into the power requirements. There's sewage requirements, how many times, you know, a certain office flushes the toilet, someone had a birthday, toilet flushes go up, so on and so forth. So as you get more and more data, you can start looking at the utilities, and you can start tweaking the utilities to improve efficiencies, improve green capabilities. And it just snowballs from there. You just start adding more sensors, aggregating more data, cross-referencing that data, and Bob's your uncle.
Okay, you still didn't give me a timeline, but going,
You want to get a question?
sure, yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrew Luck. I'm from IBI Group. I just want to make a couple of points and try to answer some of the questions that you have asked panel members. I just want to offer my opinion. Regarding question 1, how BIM makes cities smart, I think BIM is the perfect backbone to provide context to the data we're capturing, because we're getting so much data, we have to put some context to it. You know, what is happening next to what. I think BIM is a very good tool for that. Provides a way for us to interpret the data, provide context so that we can do something with it. So I also have other responses on how smart can city become. So I think we talked a lot about what can we do with the data, but we haven't talked about our maximum of what is the best we could do with the data. I think maybe that's another way to ask the question. So I offered my solution to that is that we should maximize human potential, because that's ultimately the answer, the response to the human condition. All we're doing is maximizing our human potential and minimizing the suffering. You know, if sensors tell you the pipe leaked, you got to find someone to fix it. That's great. That's what saves a lot of suffering for a person that doesn't have plumbing for a day. Yeah. I think that's a very pragmatic way to look at it. And it also provides evidence-based decision-making, so then we have more informed decisions. We don't make it based on emotions or a political climate or, you know, whim of the day. And regarding governments, I think panel already touched on it. Government can provide some expectations of privacy and protections to the citizens. I think that's what government's ultimate mandate is. So thank you for the time.
Okay,
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really agree with your first one. Well, I agree with all your points, but the first one was really good in terms of BIM providing a context for the data that's being collected. I think you really have a good point there. And I'll take note of that myself. Anybody else wants to add anything before we move on? Yep.
It's government. Oh.
Whoa, shots fired. So I actually wanted to make a little bit of a point about the data side of it, because I did go through that entire EU report. I didn't just put up the front page of it. One thing that they did point out about data, we do have the potential to collect an enormous amount right now, which is very impressive. What is equally unimpressive is that we don't necessarily have the potential to consume it right now. We don't have the ability to understand and consume all the data that is readily available. So to go back to the chicken and egg comparison, I think that there is a lot of potential, but we have to be ready for it. And part of what BIM can do, as was pointed out, is it can act as a layer of interpretation. There was a really interesting TEDx that I watched the other day about consuming open data that was published in 2003 and was using a very simple blob graph showing the GDP growth of various countries. And I found it amazing that in 2003, they proposed this, and we still haven't learned the lesson at a global scale, that, you know, data's great, but we have to be able to understand it to do anything with it. And what's the point of consuming so much if all it's going to do is escalate the health and well-being issues that are associated with digital, which is overstress and being overworked, and we have to work smarter. So there is that requirement for data, but I think there's also that requirement for smart management of data.
I like that. And just touching on that, I think there's aspects of GIS, the whole concept of that is the visualization of spatial data. So you take all these various streams, compile it together, and give it to something to a viewer that they could rationalize, understand, and interpret. And just very quick, the Smart City platform that Scott Stewart talked about, I was always fascinated when I first saw that, and I said, hey, we're going to help people do the waste management, to say, hey, there's something wrong with my city-provided garbage bin. What do I do? Well, I hit an easy app. We drive them to the data that's pertinent to getting them to say to the right person, there's something wrong, and it's not convoluted. It's not, how do I access various points, figure out how to designate this bin, where it is, the fact that it's mine, direct it to the person. I'm not dialing 311 or whatever that number is. I'm just quickly inputting, scan, in, done, issue, gets resolved. Ease. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Now, the closest thing we have to a smart city is Toronto's Quayside project. So, Claudia, what are your thoughts on it, and what aspects of it are you most interested in?
Well, I'm very interested in the project. I live in Toronto, downtown. Actually, I live on the waterfront. So as a resident, I'm most interested in them challenging the current residential model and creating a community for families and more urban social spaces. As an architect, I'm interested in the project pushing the envelope with materials and innovative ways of using, modular design. They have quite a bit of exploration in modular paving and so forth. So I'd like to see how that manifests. And then, of course, as a BIM leader, I'm interested in the data management. So what data are they collecting? How are they going to manage it and use it? And I think that's...
So, does the rest of you or anybody from the audience want to add anything to that in terms of what potentials you think that this will bring to the city?
Efficiency for sure, like better, more efficiency in the way the city will manage its resources, its assets, how it will connect with its citizens.
It'll be a good test case for how we can, what to do and what not to do when expanding the city's intelligence.
And I'm hoping it'll portray the potential, show us what can be done and how people can be connected to data.
Okay. Now, we've talked about the role of owners, but Brent, we've talked about what makes a city smart. But touching back on that, who do you think makes a city smart, or who should make the city smart?
So for me, it's all of us. I think the people make the city smart, and twofold, the residents, I said earlier, break down the fears, have that, the confidence and the comfort to share information, enter into that digital economy, and just be part of the overall smart city solution. But here at CanBIM, looking around the room, from an AECOO professional perspective, we all play a part in whatever aspect or phase of the design that we're in to ensure that we have the concept of connectivity and the concept of information sharing at the forefront when we're designing the building, designing the space, managing the asset, building, constructing, etc. We're all on the same team, and we're all enhancing the data stream.
Okay. Thank you. And Amal, you've already touched on this, but do you think will the smart city aspire to be carbon neutral, and should it?
I think it should. I should have a roadmap. The design of the smart city should have a roadmap on how to become carbon neutral. And as I said, more alliances around the carbon neutral target for the cities can be done in collaboration across the globe between different cities. I know there is Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, where cities can share and can collaborate to, its target is 80, as I said, 80% reduction from where we are today in green gas emissions. So the more cities can do together to become smarter, the better it's gonna be for the environment and the more sustainable future for the next generation.
Okay, thank you. And Omar, I have a good one for you. What are your thoughts on human-centered urbanism and the application of technology?
So it's a good thing I knew this question was coming, because I had to Google what human-centered urbanism is. It's a fancy way of saying, people go out and research the end user so that they can build for the end user in mind. So that's human-centered urbanism. And sorry, what was the rest of the question? Because I had this joke all set up. So yes,
He's not repeating it. So.
Oh, crap. Well, thanks, Arash. Human-centered urbanism, it's a natural offshoot of a smart city. You have all this data. You don't actually have to give it a fancy name anymore. It's like, I'm building something for the smart city, and I already have all this data on what the smart city needs. I know, go back to the Chinese food example, or maybe I should say Pakistani food, because I'm Pakistani and I love Pakistani food. People have been going onto the forums of the smart city and saying, you know what, there's not enough delicious halal places to get halal food, or not enough shawarma joints. So that kind of data is useful for building out. Or when you start looking and people are complaining there's not enough good places to eat around here. And, we're just building more and more residential towers. Well, yes, because we've got more and more people coming in. But you're right, people need food. So we're going to start building bigger and bigger podiums on these residential towers. So that's an example of human-centered urbanism, where you're taking the data coming in from the net or the stream, you're aggregating it, you're analyzing it, and you're coming up with conclusions that people want more places to eat. So we need to build bigger podiums on these residential towers. We still have more people, so that restriction hasn't gone away. But we do need more places for them to eat. Furthermore, more and more people are purchasing bicycles. So we're getting more, you look at the business directory and you see there's a lot of bicycle shops. So the only way these places are all viable is there's a lot of customers. And the number of car dealerships have gone down. So now suddenly you can start thinking about repurposing the roads. You can start increasing the bicycle lanes, start reducing the road lanes. You can start reducing the times of day when a road can be used by a car, and so you're focusing more towards what the city is geared towards. And then suddenly, all the bicycle shops start to close down, the car dealerships start to go up. You need to readjust the city again. So the city starts to grow and change along with its inhabitants. And that's all thanks to the data being produced and understood.
And just to expand on that, the adaptability, I think, is important. Adaptability of infrastructure to cater towards how it's reading the information in any one temporal time. And I think that's a phenomenal concept, because I've heard a lot of talk about, do we design around bikes instead of cities? Do the regulations and zonings have to change relative to how much parking is required, how much access, et cetera? And maybe yes, but maybe it has to change and adapt and be able to continually adapt. So instead of that static, as earlier the presentations talked about, the static rigidity that's forcing regulations, maintaining legacy regulations, and thus preventing potential innovation. So and there's who makes a smart city smart, that's all of us, AECOO. And those last two O's are very important, because it's the owners, operators, regulators, governments, municipalities, et cetera, that drive these regulations and can play a part with us on the AEC side to help mold what they potentially could be to facilitate the adaptability.
And remember, the city we see today, as much as we would like to see it as a smart city, wasn't built overnight. So any new smart city will not gonna happen overnight either. The culture, Toronto culture, is different from the culture in Dubai, for example. So different cities will have its own concept, its own design for its smart cities, and its own time that it will take to get there, just because the culture is different between one city and another.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank the panel. We've got a few more questions, but we're out of time. So I'd like to thank the panel for your time. Thank you for participating. Keep an eye out for our next BIM survey that's coming out by the end of this year. The first one was the biggest one that was done in Canada, with over 250 respondents from just Toronto. For the next one, with the help of CanBIM and Building Smart, we're going to push the survey nationally to the big urban centers throughout Canada. So you're going to hear about it. We'll make sure you do. And please participate, please circulate within your own firms. The more responses we can get, the more meaningful the results will be. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel again, and thank you all. I'll pass it on to
Thank you.